Who's calling me?
Gotta take this real quick.
Go ahead. From Dorset, Earl.
Hello? I'm good. How about you, Earl?
Okay, so the stream is up, but it's at a different URL. I gotta.
Uh,
All right, so for those joining us here at the actual stream, I apologize. I have no idea what happened. I tried to schedule an event, plugged in all the numbers, the streaming key, and it just it wouldn't start at the other one. So I used our reusable one here, and we are live at this new link. Although this is not the link that went out in the email, so apologize. Hopefully, people will find their way here, and if not, obviously we'll have it for you.
I like the new URL.
What's up? What's with the new URL?
Oh wait, maybe that's somebody else. I thought whoever
It's
posted
sexy.
in the chat. Yeah, Sex Z, DZ Sex G.
Oh, huh.
It's not that kind of show, guys. Yet. There's a special surprise in hour 2.
All right. Let me turn Josh's audio back on there. Didn't want to eavesdrop on his phone call.
Oh, no, I had muted myself, so
Oh,
didn't
okay.
matter.
Well, you hadn't at the start of the call.
No, I definitely did not. But then I came around.
All right. So we are
I figured
live.
even more.
We are just at a different URL. So I'm sure I'm going to get a bunch of hate mail from a bunch of angry people who got the email and didn't see the redirection there. So apologize.
Yeah, what
Hopefully
else?
we'll figure this out. YouTube is still a mystery to me.
We're just not pro. We're not pro YouTube level yet.
I mean, we're not even like live streaming from your phone amateur level.
We're not live streaming on Facebook Live from the locker room level yet.
Yep.
How's my level? Speaking of level.
It's good so far.
Okay, that's good. I'm experimenting with a cloud lifter instead of using the gain on my little USB mixer.
Ah.
Okay, we got the show notes.
Crazy.
All right, well, is everyone ready?
Gigolo?
One guy
Right
too
on.
busy playing Beat Saber to watch us.
Well, it's a compelling game.
Beat Saber? Okay.
Hmm.
Just going to go with this, I guess. All right, if everybody's ready. This is going to bug me the entire time. Okay. If everybody's ready, let's just get started. I'm gonna hold on. Whatever.
And the order again is going to be Sebastian, Jeremy, Josh, or Sebastian, Josh, Jeremy.
No, Jeremy. He's the oldest.
Sebastian, Jeremy, Josh, me. Okay.
I like how my mic is in focus and I'm not, but who cares? Okay. In 3. Well, wait. What number is this? 534. We're on 534. That's the 27th. All right. In 3, 2. Hello and welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 534, being recorded on February 27, 2019. I am Sebastian Peak.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Jim Tanis.
And if you found us by mistake, this is the official podcast of PC Perspective, PCper.com on the interwebs. And we need to get right into it because we have another barn buster of a week. We had, I think, 6 reviews go up on the site this week as we continue to plow through reviews. And the first one is, of course, the headliner of the week. Naturally, it seems to always follow a podcast that a big release comes out that we can't talk about. So while last week I was finishing up my GTX 1660 Ti review, we actually couldn't talk about anything. No performance numbers, no specs, even though the thing was leaked pretty much,
Everywhere.
Yeah. It seems like that's been the story lately. Like we're already hearing about the next one before I can even publish this one. And I'm going to kind of pick everybody's brain here about this. I know what I think about this card. I benchmarked it for a week. What does everybody else think about the GTX 1660 Ti and where it sits in the product stack? Is this really the replacement for the 1060? Is the performance level versus a GTX 1070, which, it's pretty much the same, but with less memory. Is that an issue at this performance level, at this price level? Discuss.
Sebastian, upon the advice of my lawyer, I have no comment at this time. Okay, do you really want to know?
Previous statement
Josh,
for fine.
The embargo is lifted. It's fine. You can talk about it now.
Okay, fine. There's some interesting things here. I mean, many people have been asking, what would a chip be like if it just took the shader cores and all the non-RTX and non-tensor core and non-machine learning stuff out, and what would you get? And well, we've been answered. This is exactly what you get. It's a smaller chip. It's very efficient. It runs at high clock speeds. It's about in between the 1070 and 1070 Ti overall in terms of performance. Generally,
yeah,
hello.
It depends on the game. There were certain instances where it was a little bit below a 1070, depending on resolution, and then it would be between a 1070 and 1070 Ti quite a bit. Not like the RTX 2060, which pretty much was identical to a 1070 Ti on average. So this is, that 1/2 step below, whereas the RTX 2060 kind of bridged the gap between the GTX 1070 and the 1080.
Yeah, but this is what retails at $279, correct?
Right. Yeah, retail cards, and that's for like the stock. There is no reference Founders Edition for this one, unlike what we saw with the 2060. So it's all partner boards. This was an add-in board launch, but most of the cards I'm seeing at retail have some sort of overclock. So the numbers you're seeing here are from one of those like lightly overclocked cards. Most of the numbers, all the stock numbers in the review, were from a MSI Gaming X card, which had a higher boost clock than what NVIDIA lists as stock for this new GPU. This is we'll get into that a little bit because this is not a cut down version of the TU 106 we saw on the RTX 2060. It's an all new GPU that doesn't have any of the RTX stuff in hardware. There's nothing fused off or disabled. But yeah, I mean, if you're watching the video or kind of scrolling through results, and I tested this at 1080p and at 2560 by 1440. I didn't get into any 4K testing because I think with a GPU like this, you'd have to use lower quality settings, and it's not really what this is intended for.
And then it's got 6 gigs of memory and 192-bit bus.
Yeah. I mean,
is it
but it's
GDDR5
still
or GDDR6?
Numero 6. Yeah, but it's still cheaper than a 1060 at launch. Is the part that I just love about it.
Yeah, the 6 GB version of the 1060 was $299. I forgot about that because it was only the $249 price was just for the 3 gig model.
Yeah, which was half the card it used to be.
Yeah,
at best.
So, some quick notes about the review, which the core itself is called TU116. Which NVIDIA said they built from the ground up to be basically a GPX or GTX GPU. This doesn't have any of the tensor cores, RT cores. This is simply a touring gaming GPU. And what they were able to do with that was have a massive reduction in die size. They went from 445 millimeters squared with the RTX 2060 all the way down to, I believe it's 284 millimeters squared with this, which obviously with fewer CUDA cores, this is also the full version of this new TU116. So this is not a cut down version. This is the biggest version we're going to see for this GPU, according to NVIDIA. And it is 1,536 CUDA cores. The 2060 was 1,920 CUDA cores, but looking all the way back to the GTX 1080, that was 1,280. So it's in between those two as far as the actual core count. Both the 1060, 2060, and 1660 Ti all have 48 ROPs. This does have fewer texture units than the 2060, 96 versus 120. But that memory, that it's still 6 gigabytes of the same GDDR6. And in fact, the only difference, because they both have 198 or 192-bit interface, the difference is that the memory in this 1660 Ti is clocked lower. Is anybody with me in thinking that might just have been a choice to help with product segmentation? Because I don't think any of the reviewers out there who tried had any trouble making this run at exactly the same 14 gigabit per second speed as the RTX 2060.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like segmentation, and also maybe you get a little bit less spec memory to go along with it. Stuff that, maybe not your A cores, but your B cores or whatever you want to call it. Stuff that may not clock as high, but it kind of does. And, for GPU type applications in 3D games, it's not going to matter if you get a memory error now and there. It's not going to crash anything. You're going to get, just a minute bit of strange pixel behavior, but that's about the extent of it. So yeah, it's totally segmentation, man.
I had 0 issues just bumping it up plus 1,000. I was using EVGA's Precision X. Plus 1,000, get it back up to the same 14 gigabit per second. Rock, stable, no issues at all in any of the tests, no graphical artifacts or corruption or anything like that. So it seems like that's kind of what changed this card for me. Was after testing it, I'm like, yeah, okay, it's about where the GTX 1070 is, which kind of makes sense based on the specs and the clock speeds, and where the RTX 2060 is, which is basically a 1070 Ti level performer. And then when you overclock this card, that's what was interesting, because NVIDIA specifically called out the potential, the overclocking potential of this card. They said it was going to be a great overclocker. And they didn't call out any specific numbers, but I had no trouble pushing this one for not to the level of a 2060, but significantly above stock performance levels, certainly. And it varied by game, but it was kind of like bridging the gap between that next card. Like it goes to like the 1660 Ti plus or RTX 2060 minus level. Like it's never tying a 2060. I think if you get the right card and overclock the memory and the core enough, you could make a 2060 perform identically to a stock 2070, depending on the application. I was able to do it only in one when I was overclocking the 2060 that I have, but this card certainly benefits from additional memory bandwidth, and it certainly benefits from any kind of core boost you can give. I did the OC scanner on one of the cards. I think I got like a plus 90. I was able to push it to like plus 120, no problem. Plus 135 on the core was the highest overclock I got. That translates into sustained boost clocks during my benchmarks of like 2040 megahertz to 2070 megahertz. Basically the same thing I was seeing with RTX 2060. So I don't know if that's like a limitation of this architecture or what. They definitely go up to 2 gigahertz. You can sustain them at 2 gigahertz. I didn't play with any undervolting or anything like that, but you know, a little bit more aggressive fan profile on these things would run at 2 gigahertz consistently in games. So you can certainly get some free performance with a very easy overclock, even if you just use the OC scanner tool built into like EVGA's application or MSI's Afterburner.
Huh.
And no exotic cooling needed.
So did you just do some overclocking with the memory, or did you do both of them together, the core and memory?
Both together. I tried memory first just to satisfy my curiosity about stability and whether it could really run at like its full 14 gigabit per second speed, especially because I was dealing with micron memory. I was looking at the display, what was the GPU-Z, and right away I'm thinking, you know, this is micron memory. It's probably the same stuff, and it clocked the same. Anyway, the test cards that I had, the big difference in your potential with this is going to be what the manufacturer has limited the card to do. So like if I can speak, the power limits of these cards, the little card I have right here, which if it will go into focus, it's deceptively small. This is one of those little like kind of mini ITX size cards, like 175 millimeters. But this is a thick card. This is
Thick.
a triple
double
slot.
wide.
Look at this triple slot for a small.
But
card.
what are the connectors? A DVI?
Yep, DVI,
display?
HDMI, DisplayPort.
That's
Wild and wacky.
it. Just doesn't work for me anymore.
Yeah. Nope.
I guess that they're aiming this for the single monitor type individual, and you know that's fine. But you know, there's some productivity apps and stuff. But I guess if you gotta, you know, try to get 3 monitors that, you know, one's HDMI, one's DVI, and one's DisplayPort, that's kind of a pain in the tuckish.
Hey Josh, look at this one. This is the MSI Gaming X.
Oh, see, that's better. 3 DisplayPort,
3 display
one
ports
HDMI.
and HDMI.
That's much better.
And actually, I don't see it on this one. I remember in our briefing about this, it will be up to the partner, but they can add a USB Type-C as well.
Will it actually
Don't
support
they
the
include a
VR link?
controller?
What was that?
Go ahead,
There was
Jeremy.
Yeah, I was going to say you can add the USB port, but is it actually going to actually support VR Link?
I believe so. I'll have to look at my notes again, but I thought that was something that could be enabled that wasn't like blocked, but was up to the AIB.
Okay.
And I'll go back to my notes on that one. But yeah, like it seems that not just in display connectivity, but in power limit, there's a lot of choices that can be made by these partners. And, you know, they can set the boost clock speeds. The power limit on this little card, well, the little big card, is 100%. And so there's not a whole lot of headroom for overclocking. I was still able to set the same overclock. It's just it didn't sustain it under load. I was at around the 1985 megahertz range under load with the small card, which is still fine. 1770 is the stock, like the rated boost clock, but that's very dependent on thermals and a power limit. And the MSI has a very modest 107%. So we're going to see cards with a much higher power limit, and those could be the ones that could potentially get up into that RTX 2060 range. I just haven't done it yet. So any other thoughts on the 1660 Ti? Is this, I don't know if we talked about it, do you think that $279.99 is a good price for this? Is it too expensive still? Can we legitimately call this a 1060
Well,
success?
it's significantly faster than the RX 590, right? And that one's what, $10 cheaper in retail?
Well, for now.
Yeah, but I
it's
don't.
not a permanent.
I don't know if the RX 590 is going to be dropping down significantly in price, or it just is going to dry up. I mean, there's a ton of RX 570s and 580s and eBaying 470s and 480s, and I mean those are great cards for the price and for 1080p gaming. But this is this is a significant jump up in performance. It's just unfortunate that they only have 6 gigs of memory. I mean, that's not going to hold you back in a lot of applications. Like I think Far Cry 5, I was looking at some of the usage there, and it's in between 4 and 5 gigabytes of space that it uses of video memory. And that's still a relatively recent title. Some of the newer ones, what is it? What was the one that really ate up the memory?
Well,
Thinking it was
Division
Rise
2,
of the Tomb Raider?
Division 2 is supposed to be, the recommended spec, I think, is 8 gigabytes, right? For like the best experience. Isn't it high like that?
Yeah, I didn't play the demo on that one, not the demo, but the beta. I'm just kind of trying to remember what some other people have tested to kind of look at where that was. I know Scott Wasson of AMD did a thing about, hey, this Radeon 7 16 gigs is actually useful in these scenarios. But I'm kind of wondering what just kind of day-to-day type stuff that somebody who wants to get into, like the Division 2 and other cutting-edge titles. What Anthem just came out. I think that uses quite a bit of memory.
Trying to figure out how much Exodus uses as well. Because Metro.
But yeah, I upgraded my kid from a R9 290 4 gig to an RX 580 8 gig, and it was a significantly smoother experience with more memory. And even though those two cards in terms of performance are really, really close together.
One thing I'll add is that you were talking about like what Scott at AMD had said about the Radeon 7 and utilizing some of that massive 16 gigabyte frame buffer they have. His particular use case was, I believe, using VSR, so the virtual super resolution. NVIDIA has DSR. You could, in theory, enable DSR in the NVIDIA driver with this card, go into the game, pick a resolution that's above your monitor's resolution, have it render at that resolution, then downscale at the display output, and effectively get, correct me if I'm wrong, that's basically a full screen anti-aliasing effect as it downsamples, right?
Yeah, that's my understanding of it. And the reality too, though, is when you're doing that, if you have to do that to take advantage of the extra memory, you're going to hit, at least on modern games, you're going to hit a performance level on the card's processor before you reach the memory limit. I mean, there are games like in Josh said, if you're coming from a 2 or 4 gig card, sure, but I think it's 6 gigabytes. If you're going to hit games, modern games, if you're going to hit that memory limit, you're going to be at a resolution where the performance isn't going to be acceptable anyway, either natively scaling to 4K or higher, or doing some sort of dynamic super sampling or whatever. So, I mean, I always want the industry to be pushing forward. I don't want there to be limits, but I think that, looking at the way the AMD had to demonstrate it, you're talking about use cases that are going to be on the fringe of what the vast majority of gamers are going to be encountering, at least today. Maybe not a year from now, or whatever comes next. But
Yeah, and the problem
Soon.
with that too was, sorry, Jeremy, what was that?
No, it's Josh, but go ahead.
Oh, I should probably be looking at the display so I know who's talking. But yeah, what I was going to say is Scott's use case, if you look at the frame time chart, and you can go back to our Radeon 7 review, I have that in there. I'm pretty sure, even though there's no y-axis listed there, that you're talking about a 20 millisecond-ish average frame time. When I was playing around with the virtual super resolution stuff, the frame rates were very low. So yeah, I was able to push the memory way up over 8, get to like 10, 11 by using very high virtual resolutions like 4 and 5K. Actually, I was doing 5K. I even tried 8K, but that was insane. I was at like 1.5 frames per second at that point. But very, very low frame rates when you start messing around with that stuff at higher detail settings, which is kind of what you have to do to use 10 gigabytes of memory in these games. So it, like Far Cry 5, even with the HD texture pack installed and enabled, you're still only just over 6 gigabytes at 4K. It was like it was under 7. But if you're gaming on a mid-range GPU, a 1660 Ti to me is like a 1440, and ideally a 1080, monitor kind of card. So I personally don't think it's an issue, only because I've been benchmarking for like the last 2 months straight, and nothing that I benchmark by design essentially goes above 6 gigabytes, because I want a level playing field for all the cards. You'd hammer on a card that only has 6 gigabytes of memory if you intentionally chose like an ultra 4K benchmark that needed more than 6 gigabytes of memory. But at the same time, we don't really test single GPUs at 4K ultra with HD textures in the industry right now. That's limited to the very high end cards, and I'm not, trying to compare a mid range card to like a RTX 2080 Ti or something. So, and like the Radeon 7 does not appear in the benchmark charts, if you don't notice, because I'm like, you know what, $500, let's make that the cutoff, because at some point it just becomes academic to say, well, this $1,000 or $1,200 card can do so much more than this $279 card can. So,
And this doesn't support SLI, does it?
No, I don't believe so. No, it does not. In fact, that came up in the Q&A, and the answer was a little interesting. It was, SLI has always been for the high end. That's where like the enthusiast tries to get the absolute most out of their system by pairing up 2 high-end cards, which I thought was probably the opposite.
Really?
Yeah.
The opposite of correct.
Yeah, isn't it? You buy an inexpensive GPU, and then when you can afford another one, you pair them up, and you can get the same performance of the really expensive GPU.
When I go out and buy a Titan, I always buy 2. Like, really? No.
Well, I think that there's a segment of the market that's chasing the 3D Mark leaderboards and stuff. That obviously that's the case, and due to the decline, the rather abrupt decline in quality of SLI experiences, I think that's probably more today where you're going to see it, because SLI is so inconsistent these days. There are so many games where not only does it scale nowhere near 1-to-1 in terms of adding that second card, but in some cases you have a performance decrease, or you introduce micro stuttering or other issues. So, because I used to run SLI setups, and there was a period 5 or 6 years ago where you could make a really strong argument for it, adding that second card down the road. But today there's so few titles where it really makes sense to do that. And I think, it was Ryan who said for years now, always buy the best single card you can. If you have to add SLI down the road, that's your fallback, but you should set out to put as much money into a single high performance card up front, because that's where you're always going to have the best experience.
And you know what really sucks about SLI, now that we're going on a segue, is that, so I had bought the HD SLI link You know, the higher end one that you could use on the 1070s, 1080s. And now, of course, those are obsolete with the NVLink based.
Have you yelled at
It's like,
Jacob yet?
gosh. What? Have I yelled
Have
at
you
Jacob?
yelled at Jacob about? Yeah.
No.
Well, wasn't it the EVGA one that you bought? The
I think
fancy
so.
SLI
But
bridge?
why would I
Yeah.
yell at him? It's NVIDIA who's designing these GPUs.
Fair enough.
He's just selling them.
Well, the high bandwidth SLI link still works for your Pascal cards. I mean, you're not going to. The NV-Link is this new thing.
No,
on
but I
top of
bought
that.
a $40 link for, you know, Pascal. I'm thinking, hey, maybe when 2070s or whatever they're going to be called come out one day, I can just move that over there. Nope. Oh,
planned
well,
obsolescence. That
it's
They-
like
they
Intel and sockets.
They need to talk to the USB IF about that
Oh,
to come
God,
up with a
please.
standard that we can all agree on. All right. Well,
SLI 2 by 4.18.
yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, final closing thoughts on the 1660 Ti. Breath of fresh air, or is it just kind of a mediocre thing in the middle of the pack of cards?
Nice to have a new GPU at
Sebastian.
$300.
Oh,
I
Jeremy,
got
go
there
ahead.
first.
Say it again.
It's nice to have a new GPU sitting at $300.
Yeah.
And under.
If it's,
Yeah.
I think that it's another one of those launches where you look at the price, you look at the performance, and it's not exciting to say this is a logical price for this performance level. It's up to 50% faster than the old 1060 6 GB. Not in every game, of course. I think I had 2 games where I hit that level, and that was right where NVIDIA had told us it would be, like up to 1.5x a 1060. So for what could be argued an inflation adjusted price of the 1060 3 GB from a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, it's fine. It's very good. It's just we're looking for these really exciting like gains in performance and reduction in price, and I don't think that they're being pushed very hard right now, to put it mildly, by the competition, because AMD is still sitting on the 500 series cards for that sort of mainstream 1080p gamer, and they're not getting
How many years
fast.
ago was
Saw
Polaris
590.
released?
Good question.
4?
I do not.
3? I think at least 3. I think it was 3 years ago.
Yeah,
The
2016.
Polaris was launched.
Yeah.
That's kind of nuts. We have some long-lived graphics architectures here.
It's like consoles. We're sitting on the same GPU architecture for, well, not as long as consoles, not 6 years, but I just want to see more. Like we've already seen rumors about more, and we'll probably talk about that later in the podcast, but more and more in like the mainstream segment, like get closer to $200 and then go below $200 and see what they can do with the board powered cards. And I don't think they'll make as big a splash as they did with Maxwell with the 750 Ti, but just generational leaps in performance and what we can do with less power. Because that's one thing about touring so far we're not really seeing. Like if you look at the performance jump from the 1060 to this 1660 Ti, that's coming with 84 millimeters squared of additional die space, the same TDP, and for whatever reason, all the add-in board partners ship these cards, at least so far, with an 8-pin connector, and I believe NVIDIA said that they would all be 8-pin connectors, which is a little odd unless it's exclusively drawing power from the GPU or from the PSU, because you could get by on 120 watt TDP with just slot power plus a 6-pin. It gives additional overclocking headroom, but we have to wait for cards that actually will push like 120, 130% power to actually even begin to use some of that versus a 6-pin. So it's just kind of interesting. Like I think the next card will probably end up being like a 6-pin power connector and a lower TDP, and probably closer to the 1060, like maybe a little 10, 15, 20% bump over the 1060, but occupy about the same price level. Because this, I mean, 279, you'd think the next card would be a little bit less. So maybe $200, maybe 220, who knows? But anyway, that's way too many words for final thoughts about this.
Sure. Overall, I like the card. I like the technology. I like that they were able to scrap the Tensor cores and RTX stuff and machine learning stuff. And though ML the DLSS would have been kind of cool in a product like this, but that's still a lot of extra stuff in the die and extra power that is going to be needed to draw. And they're juggling with what they want to offer as a feature to sell cards versus what the price is of all that. So I can understand getting rid of RTX and DLSS and machine learning and just having this really focused card that doesn't eat a whole lot of power, that performs really well, that is a lower price than the initial 1060, but still performs better. But it's not a paradigm shift. It's not like the original GTX 680, 670 series, which were amazing, as well as Pascal GTX 1070, 1080. When they were released, it was it was a no-brainer to get one of those because they were so much faster at the prices offered than anything before. And that was, of course, before the crypto crap. But yeah, it's nice to see things getting back on their sea legs.
This would be a different story if we didn't still have Pascal out there in the retail supply chain, where you can still buy a 1070 brand new for like $329. So then you look at that, you look at that versus this, and this is around the same performance, if not the same performance as a 1070, 2 gigabytes less memory, if that matters to you, but about $50 less. So to me, that's good. But it's not as compelling as it would be if the next product up was like $450 and this started to look like a huge like performance boost and a budget price. But I've said all this stuff before. It's I think it's like I said in the review, just a logical progression of Turing and DLSS and stuff that's not possible with something that doesn't have the native hardware support, because DLSS really is just, it's in conjunction with real-time ray tracing, so you have to have that in the hardware. But we'll be here all night if we don't move on.
Moving along.
Jim, you reviewed Memory. It's coming
shiny,
back.
Shiny
RAM
Memory.
reviews are coming back in 2019.
Yes, it is. So this is not it just launched last week, but it's not brand new. Corsair teased this at CES, and this is their new Dominator Platinum, which is their flagship memory brand, but it's Dominator Platinum RGB. And not just any RGB, Capellix RGB. And I think I'm pronouncing that right. I had some confusion about that when I was writing the story because I couldn't recall my meetings at CES, but Capellix is a new micro LED technology that Corsair developed along with Primax. It's a Taiwan-based electronics firm. They do a lot of OEM stuff. And there's other companies pursuing similar stuff. But basically what this is a new way of putting LEDs, RGB LEDs, directly taking the substrate and putting it directly on the PCB. So you by doing that, you can significantly reduce the size. So the volume of a Capellix LED is 0.2 millimeters cubed, whereas a traditional LED is 2.8 millimeters cubed. So a significant reduction there. they're much more energy efficient. So what that does is that gives you more more brightness at the same power draw, or less energy efficiency at the same brightness. So for something like memory, where this is their first product using it, it's both brighter and a little bit more energy efficient. They kind of played the middle there. But when they apply this to their gaming wireless headsets, wireless keyboards, you're going to get basically better battery life is the short term. You get nice, bright, relatively bright LEDs, RGB LEDs, and the better battery life. So you get some actually decent wireless per key LED options for things like keyboards. So that's the flashy side of this. But looking at it, you compare it to the former Dominator Platinum. It's a very similar design. You're going to recognize it immediately. The heatsink's been redesigned slightly, but it's the same basic shape, and it's their kind of highest binned, highest quality chips. They're not, Corsair partners with various OEMs. They're not making the memory chips themselves, but in terms of what they pick based on their suppliers, this is their kind of highest quality parts that go into this series. And they're not the highest performance. That usually goes to their Vengeance series, but they're pretty high performance. And again, the higher quality is sort of the impression. And so here, if you're watching the video, you can see them. I wouldn't run them like this, but just to see the kind of side by side, you've got the old style Dominator Platinum on the left, and the new style Dominator Platinum RGB on the right. There's only 12 Capellix LEDs in that top of that module there, and they're still quite bright, as you could see in the video earlier. In terms of performance, they're releasing a ton of SKUs. I think there's 22 different SKUs of this memory, ranging from 3000 megahertz at 16 gigabyte kit at 3000 to 128 gigabyte kits, and speeds all the way up to 4800. Relatively tight timings. The kit we had was a 32 gigabyte 4x8 kit at 3200 megahertz with the XMP profile. And basically, because we've started over here, we don't have a huge history of RAM benchmark results. So I benchmarked basically the Dominator Platinum RGB at its stock at several overclock settings based on frequency and timings, and also its predecessor, the non-RGB Dominator Platinum, both at 2666 and 3000, and various voltages too, depending on the overclock. And
dude, I'm so impressed with this because I've tested memory before, and I hate it. I hate testing memory, especially when you start overclocking it, because stuff gets wonky. So kudos to you for the patience and the skill to test memory, because memory sucks.
Yeah, you do have to be careful. So we've got a nice dedicated test bed, so that was good. I could play with the processor frequencies. I could play with the various timings and the voltages, and it took out of the 7 results, or let's see, 6. I can't count. 6 results, 6 categories that I tested. There were probably 20 different starting points where I tried to get stable frequencies, tried to pick frequencies and timings that made sense. And this is what we ended up with. And the benefit of overclocking memory after a certain point is going to vary based on your needs. We've run some synthetic benchmarks here. We've run some tests to kind of show bandwidth latency. How much this affects your workflow, how much it's going to affect what you're doing with your games, your professional applications, is going to depend on those applications themselves. So we try to show sort of a baseline of what you can expect. And this memory, this RGB Dominator Platinum memory, overclocks very well. We got it to a maximum of 4000 megahertz at 1.4 volts, which is under the, DDR4 is tricky. The whole point of DDR4 was you got lower voltages out of the gate. A lot of memory runs at 1.2 or 1.35. They say that it's sort of 1.5 is the maximum. Others say don't go that high. So 1.4 is probably a good safe, high-end level to go with your voltages. And when you're at that voltage at 4000 megahertz with this memory, you see a nice progression. It scales almost linearly with frequency. So you see the numbers go up for memory-focused benchmarks. And it performed well. It stayed as cool, relatively cool. Didn't have any hiccups once you dialed in these frequencies. It didn't have any issues with stability. So you can push this memory quite hard, and if you go for one of the higher clocked kits out of the gate, you may even be able to get quite a bit more on top of that as well. So, you see what you get here: latencies and speeds go up, latencies go down. It's good memory. It's good solid memory. Now it is a little bit pricey, although it's not significantly more expensive than the non-RGB Platinum memory. So the Dominator Platinum memory is not going to be your cheapest option in general before this introduction. But now that this is out, you're paying about the same, maybe $10 more at each SKU level than you would for non-RGB Dominator Platinum. So if you're willing to pay that premium, it's a good choice. The memory integrates directly with the iQ software, so you can set up all kinds of profiles. There's hardware-based profiles that'll store the lighting effects that you choose on the memory, so you can take it out of a system, put it in a system that doesn't have iQ, and it'll still work. There's software control if you want to do that. That gives you a few more options, things like music visualizers and all that. It integrates with all your Corsair RGB peripherals, works quite well, very easy to set up, and it looks pretty. It's the best looking memory I've seen. I don't like a lot of RGBs in my case, but these RGBs, you can make them look crazy, but you can also make them look somewhat classy. And they're bright, they're responsive. It's a nice kit. And here you can see.
So what
all
what
the
about
SKUs.
those G-Skill Royals?
Okay,
Are
well,
those nice looking?
I'm sure somebody thinks they're nice looking. They're a little too. I don't have.
A little too garish.
Yeah, I don't.
For you.
I don't have the style to support something like that. It would just not look right in my setup. So, but if you're interested in something like this, even if you just go with a nice white accent on your lighting, it's real nice. So, like I said, there's a SKU here for everybody, based on timing, speed, capacities. Again, pricey. Memory prices thankfully have come down a bit over where they were, but this is not the cheapest memory out there. But if you're looking for something really nice, a real unique look with good performance, it's worth checking out.
It's interesting as another aside. Corsair was one of the first to actually introduce lighting in their DIMMs with their original DDR1 DIMMs. I think that they had those lights that would show, the workload on there, or how much bandwidth is being consumed. And what's another word for that? Why am I just blanking out on this? Other than the alcohol. Load.
Is it activity?
Load. It's a 4-letter word. Go figure. But anyway, yeah, I mean, back in the day, it was DDR1. They had those first ones. They had to do some really interesting engineering to get them to light up, because, the power that is provided to a DIMM slot, back in those times, you had to do some really finicky, interesting things to get it all to come together. So it's neat to see them come with something like this. And do you remember those DIMMs that you could pop on that LCD display that it would scroll across words that you wanted to put in, or temperatures or speeds or any of that? This is like
the old high school
12 years ago.
LED banner thing. You could program
exactly.
in 8 or
Corsair
10
had
words
that.
or something.
It's bizarre. But moving along. Sorry.
I'm in favor of more screens on everything. We saw a power supply at CES from Asus that has like an OLED display built into it.
Isn't that new Lightning card? Has the MSI Lightning card has an OLED display?
Yeah, everything, the case itself, every component within the case could and should have its own display and RGB lighting. Although
up to and including the heat spreader on your CPU.
It's just wasted space that could be taken up with more
Exactly.
of these RGBs. What were the RGB lights called again, Jim, in this memory?
It's Capellix, I think.
Capellix. Acapella lighting.
Sort of.
Compelling.
So there's
Yeah.
no instruments behind them. None.
You know what? That memory would look great in a fancy new motherboard. Like the ROG Maximus 11 formula, which is one of the more deluxe Intel Z390 motherboards on the market today. They have one
How much do you think that box weighs with all that crap in there?
30 pounds.
At least. You could
40.
do some, if only they had a handle on that, you could use that as like a barbell.
Actually, you know what? In all seriousness, because this motherboard has VRM hybrid water blocks built into it from EK, it probably
Variable
does weigh
weight.
a bit. Yeah. Well, yeah, with or without liquid. That's true.
Yeah.
You could make this weigh 30 pounds if you wanted to, Josh.
I could. I could
But
put some
do you-
depleted uranium in the slots, and that'd be great.
Do you have the standoffs for it?
No, I don't.
Can your standoffs handle a 30-pound motherboard? So if you look at the list of features, basically ASUS with these ROG boards, we've seen the more affordable Strix boards. I have one of them for like a mini ITX board. They're not even that expensive, which to me kind of was mind-boggling because I had known the ROG, the Republic of Gamers brand, to be these very like deluxe and premium pricing to go along with the premium features. And this definitely falls into that category. This is the full-on ROG experience here. So you're getting, what are some of the features here? You have dual LAN, you have the Aquantis 5G LAN, the 5 gigabit. You have an Intel gigabit NIC as well. You've got the cross-chill EK3, what they call the VRM hybrid cooling. You can use it passively or connect it to a liquid cooling loop. But
Don't forget the 2 Live Dash OLED.
yes, exactly. 2-inch OLED display built into the motherboard.
Wait, did you say 2 Live Dash? Weren't they a
Yes.
Miami rap group in the 80s
Yep.
that had really terrible lyrics?
Yeah.
Right.
That was the
I
Gigabyte
read
2
that.
Live crew.
Yes.
JR.
So, kind of scrolling through here, and there is a plethora of imagery to feast your eyes on here in this review from Maury, who took it through its paces, looked at, every aspect of the board. And I will say, in spite of its costs, which I have not mentioned yet, is 400 and let's see, I think the list is
50 bucks.
449. It was actually selling for
About 420.
418.
Yeah.
Yeah, 420. And
That's
I-
Looney Tunes, man.
I do like
That's
because,
X399 prices.
because we've seen so many GPUs now that are getting fatter and fatter. They update a lot, or they space their by 16 PCI ports for triple slot. So that top spot there's just nothing beneath it that you're going to be blocking if you've got a nice fat GPU in there.
I tell you, they better have really good audio because getting rid of my PCI sound card is just not an option, dude.
They have Sonic Studio Link 3.
But you know what? If you look at the strengths and weaknesses on the final page, and this earned a surprising editor's choice from Maury, who
He
is
doesn't
pretty-
do that often.
No, he is very hard on motherboards. Well, I mean, I'm not going to go down that road, but he is. He looked it over. Really, under weaknesses, he said price. Of course, this is very expensive, but he thought you got what you paid for. He thought that every aspect of this board, as he tested it, to him justified the pricing. And he tests a lot of motherboards, and he even put CMOS battery placement up on the strengths.
Oh,
Because if you look, And not every board does this, especially the boards that have this kind of armor. I know of at least one other ROG board where you have to remove the armor to get to the battery. Not so in this one. Easily
Nope,
accessible.
you can see it peeking out through the bottom.
That's right.
So honestly, if
Way
you're
to
not going
go,
to water
Asus.
cool, yeah. If you're not going to water cool your CPU, this is maybe not your best choice. Because when some of the pictures he shows and he's integrated his water cooling loops right into the motherboard, that's kind of neat and it's going to make your build look very, very unique. But if you're slapping a giant thermal tank on there, you're going to lose a little bit of the joy that this thing could give you.
So check it out at the website, pcper.com. Maury, a surprising editor's choice. Find out why. More at 11. Actually, it is 11 here anyway, in the Eastern time zone. It's 11:08 p.m.
We should move along then.
Yeah. So give me more. Give me more, like a nice air cooler that you could maybe not be the best choice for this board.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to spend $449 on a motherboard and you have no money left, start looking around. What's the number one, guys? I'll take a poll here. What's the number one CPU cooler on Amazon.com? Just take a guess. Something
that Cooler
affordable.
Master.
Yep, you're getting warmer.
Something TX.
Yep, TX 1138 from Cooler Master. It was actually the first Cooler Master cooler designed by George Lucas in the late 1970s. I think it was while he was still a film student at USC.
Yes.
No, the Hyper 212 Evo. Anytime I do a cooler review, I've been doing cooler reviews for 5 years at this website. And anytime I have ever done a cooler review, I had people ask me about comparisons to the Hyper 212 Evo. Why isn't the 212 Evo on the chart? 212 Evo is the best. And I went out and bought one way back then, just so I would have one on hand so I could compare it to stuff. And I ended up, I think, reviewing it at least twice over the last 5 years. And I got it back out again. I have my 212 Evo in the box, unpacked it all, put it back on the test bench because Cooler Master has released the Hyper 212 Black Edition coolers. And these are not just a cosmetic upgrade. They are fully fleshed out redesigns of the 212, basically the 212 Evo. The Evo is missing from the name, but the Black Edition, you could think of it as the sort of deluxe version of the Evo. And the MSRP of this cooler is $40, but the street price is only $35. So you're right back into that Hyper 212 Evo territory where it's been dominating Amazon for years in that $30 to $35 range. And it's the absolute go-to aftermarket CPU cooler for a lot of people. And it wasn't perfect. And I've installed and uninstalled this thing enough to know some of its flaws. Like the mounting system for the Evo was not the best. It's this X-shaped thing that's got kind of like a spring-loaded action to it, and you have to sort of fish it through the heat pipes to get it installed. And it can only be oriented one way because there's like this little indentation you have to have in the right location. It was annoying. People dealt with it because once you got it mounted, the performance was great and the price is great. This new Black Edition has an all-new mounting system. I'm holding the heatsink right here, which of course has some thermal compound on it because I just took it off the board. But if you look in the review, it has legitimate mounting hardware. Like we're into that kind of Noctua, if I can get this to focus, territory where you have metal brackets that screw into place, whether you have an Intel or AMD situation, and it looks more polished, it feels more polished, it mounts more easily and more securely. The 212 Evo, for me, and even tightening it down all the way at all 4 points, I could always kind of rotate it against the CPU and kind of float along on the thermal interface material, but not so with this one. This thing is like locked in place, and the results showed this because even though they're very close to the Evo, it was still on average about a degree cooler. And I attribute that mainly to the improved mounting mechanism. But when we look at sound levels, the actual performance of this new fan, same temperature results essentially, but drastically lower noise. And the Evo was never the quietest cooler. It's always lived around 44, 45 decibels for me under load. And it's only spinning at around 2000 RPM. And this new fan is also rated up to 2000. I think it was only spinning around 1920 or so for me at load. But the same noise levels as like an Intel stock cooler, literally like 38.5 decibels, 6.5 decibels lower than the 212 Evo, which is it's huge. If 6.5 doesn't sound like a lot to you, insert joke here, but it's and forget about like it. Yes, there's an RGB fan on this, and if you don't like the RGB fan, which is well implemented here, by the way, it has the same RGB connector that will go on most boards, and it's certified for the different standards. It also comes with an optional little like handheld controller, so you don't even need a motherboard that has those headers. You can just like click through the different colors and patterns and things. That's the way I tested it. But if you don't like the RGB aspect of this, there's another version of it that's actually just a little bit less and comes with a plain black fan, but is otherwise identical. So I think they hit it out of the park with this. I think it's in every way an improvement over the 212 Evo. I love the mounting mechanism, and especially now that it's quiet, 38.5 decibels under load with the fan pretty much spinning at max RPM is fantastic. So if you're looking for an aftermarket cooler, $35 on Amazon when I published the review, it's just a no-brainer to me. Gave it the editor's choice, and very, very happy with this. And I think a lot of people who've gone to that Evo, that's the name that's still out there, and there's still a lot of reviews online saying that that's the cooler to get. But I think this has supplanted it easily. Plus, it just looks a lot nicer. Like they've gone with a black nickel finish, no more exposed copper. The base is a little bit nicer. Like the actual base where it meets the CPU was a little rough with the 212 Evo. It kind of depended on which like unit you got, how flat it was and how well milled it was, but it's just overall a better product for around the same money, which is always great. Does anybody have any thoughts about this?
A new legend is born again.
Yep.
Yes.
I miss the old days when you had the chance of driving a screwdriver through your motherboard every time you mounted a CPU cooler. That was living.
Yeah, I ruined a Tyan dual Athlon board by trying to get a heatsink on there. That made me very, very sad because it was a cool board. I ran Doom 3 and multi-threading on it way back in the day.
I do not miss stabbing with a flathead screwdriver at a bracket to try to get it over like a socket 370. Those days are gone, and I'm very, very happy about it. I will say though, speaking of living dangerously, I had a couple of requests to test an Intel stock cooler. Like, where's the reference? Like, there's a reason Intel does not ship the stock cooler with their unlocked parts. Like this Kaby Lake i7 7700K, which, by the way, the reason I test with that, even though it's a couple generations old at this point, that is the hottest CPU I've ever used. It is astonishingly hot. And I thought it was just my CPU, because I bought the first one, I think I bought it at Micro Center. I ordered another one of these, and it was just as hot. It's just a ridiculously hot CPU. And running that stock cooler on this thing, even in a cold room, I was not brave enough to run it in a warm environment, because in my cold room testing that night, it was 98C, just under a standard load with that cooler. So a delta of like 82 point something, and just absolutely, it finished the test. I didn't actually thermal throttle or have a shutdown, but you do not want to use an Intel stock cooler. So do yourself a favor and get something a little bit better than that. Moving on.
Well, actually, I can't get over the fact that they missed the marketing opportunity to name this the Hyper 212 Emo.
Ooh, that would have
Because
been perfect.
it's all black. I get it. They're kind of like getting into that Be Quiet territory with the dark rock stuff where it's all black. Like the black nickel is trendy. I think we're seeing more coolers that are going to be like shunning the naked like aluminum fins and copper heat pipes, but they'll come back. Everything comes back eventually. And you know what else comes back? Speakers. When was the last time we talked about a speaker review? When it wasn't like a little, pair. I think, was it you, Jim, who reviewed the last set of speakers we had on the site?
Uh,
It was another like
What
Logitech
was the
set.
Logitech ones that had the LCD bias?
that's
Yeah, the
right. Yeah,
lighting.
it was the Logitech gamer speakers that had the RGB lighting that shined off the back of the speaker up onto your wall to create the bias lighting effect. Yeah, that was probably.
You want to know the last speakers that I think I reviewed for this site? It was the Corsair 2500 SP2 2500, something like that. They're the pretty high end speakers, but it was a 2.1 setup, and that was back in 2010. Speakers just aren't, especially PC ones. I'm still running my Logi 5.1s. What are those? I can't remember. 5200 something. I can't.
Trying to remember my own.
Yeah, no, but these things have not changed for 13 years, 14 years.
Yeah, there's
crazy.
Here Sebastian is got show and
My,
tell for us.
My computer speakers are the Boston Acoustics A26, which feature a 6.5 millimeter driver and a 1-inch soft dome tweeter, and really punch above their weight.
Wait, 6.5 millimeter driver?
6.5 inch. Did I say millimeter?
Thank you. You said millimeter.
I did. Okay, so this is the 6.5 inch driver. Listen to that. And 1-inch silk dome tweeter. Kind of a polite top end. It's a silk dome, so it doesn't really have extended, harsh high frequency response, but an excellent option, especially when you buy it refurbished. I picked up this pair for around $200. So, what were you saying, Jim?
But anyway, Jim.
Well, anyway, what I'm about to talk about has nothing to do with that quality or price range. This is an entry-level system in every sense of the word. It's the Logitech Z606. It's a powered 5.1 speaker system. It's the successor to the Z506, which is now, 9 years old. I think they came out in 2010. And it's not Logitech's gaming brand, the Logitech G brand, which is those RGB speakers we mentioned before. This is sort of their consumer standard Logitech line. And Logitech has a lot of really good speakers, a lot of good affordable speakers. And in fact, one of the desktop setups I have right now is about $100 2.1 system. And this is a surround sound powered system. It's $129.99, so yeah, $130. It's 5.1 with 5 identical satellites, which is a little interesting because their previous, the Z506, had a center channel that was different. It was laid horizontally instead of vertically, so it went a little better in a traditional speaker arrangement. Whereas these are all
that.
Right there we go. Yeah,
that one.
Exactly. There you go.
Now I remember what speakers I have.
there you go. This is they're all identical. They're about 10 watts each on the satellites, 25 watts RMS on the subwoofer, and they're okay at that price range. They sound what you would expect. It's a warm sound. It's slightly muddy. It doesn't really have that impact, but it's perfectly acceptable. As I mentioned, I would, if you have a setup in your home theater, like you're going to hook up a gaming PC or you're going to hook up a for your Blu-ray player or media player, I would go with something like this over an entry-level soundbar. But there's one problem where they didn't improve in the last 9 years over the Z506, and that's in the inputs. If I could find it here, the inputs on this guy are analog only. It's got Bluetooth 4.2, so you can get a digital stereo input wirelessly through Bluetooth. But if you're talking about wired inputs, and particularly discrete multi-channel inputs, your only option are individual RCA inputs for each channel. And they talk about how, in a, because again, this isn't the gamer setup, so this could also apply to like home theater users. A lot of like DVD and Blu-ray players have those individual RCA outputs on the back for each channel. And that was true years ago. And you can probably still find some players today that have that, but that's not nearly as common today. It's also not as common to have that on your PC. Like some motherboards still have the individual 3.5 millimeter outputs for each channel, which you could then adapt to RCA, but not a lot of them do. Laptops certainly don't. Macs certainly don't. And so you're going to need some way to get a multi-channel signal into here. Now, if you do input a stereo signal, you can do, 5.1 processing, and you've got some controls on here or on the remote that lets you do the simulated surround sound that, kind of expands the stereo image to all the speakers. And that's okay, but I don't like that. Some people might. I've never liked that, even in its higher end, like Dolby Prologic implementations. And this is just a generic sort of signal processor. So in that setting, if you don't have an input that can get you these, or at least easily get you through some sort of adapter, these multi-channel RCA inputs, you're really limiting yourself. And if you're going to be using this as a stereo set, because you don't have those inputs, you're better off going with a 2.1 setup, even from Logitech. And you can get some, like, I think I have the ones I have are the Z533s. It's a 2.1 stereo, nice speaker from Logitech. It sounds better. It's a little cheaper. And like I said, you're missing the point here, or they're missing the point, I think. So by not having a digital input of any kind, other than Bluetooth, a digital wired input, you're really missing, or limiting yourself. It's just not, I just don't see how it's worth it. So the sound at that price is fine. Not going to blow you out of the water, but it's what you'd expect at $130. And if you have those analog inputs, it's a good option. But I think it's a miss here. I think, it's been 9 years since the Z506, and it's basically the same system with the addition of Bluetooth, which is welcome, but not enough. You had, even a USB input on this thing, to say nothing of optical or HDMI or anything like that. That's what it's missing. It's got the DAC. It's got to have a DAC inside. It's not a matter of not having a DAC because you got the Bluetooth signal. So it's doing some sort of digital to analog conversion, and to not have another way to access that seems, it just seems kind of limited. So, unfortunately, unless you have that specific kind of source device with those discrete analog outputs, it's something I would avoid it. I would go for another 5.1 system with a digital input, or like I said, if you're just primarily going to be doing stereo, Logitech has a ton of great options in that price range for 2.1 setups.
Jim, you made me very, very sad here, because I I looked up when I actually did buy my Logitech Z5500 speakers, and it was 2005. So yeah, they're 14 years old. And when they die, and they will eventually die, there is nothing out there to really replace them.
Well, Logitech does have a higher end 5.1 setup with digital inputs, but it's $400. So
yeah,
you can go to a higher price point and you'll get a better quality sound as well as that flexibility on inputs. So there are options, but at this sort of 100,
have you tried to buy one of those lately? Because that's seriously a 10-year-old product.
Yeah,
and I don't know how much they actually shipped.
That's a good point.
Anyway, sorry to bump me all out.
There's not enough demand for speakers, it seems, these days. There's so many gaming headsets and new ones coming out all the time, and better portable sound like that. But dedicated speakers, it's pretty much into the active monitors world now. Well, unless you want surround sound, but you can make that work too. But I know I personally use that set I was just talking about. I know Jim has like a nice dedicated pair of active monitors. Mine are passive, but to get that big full range sound, it's almost a thing of the past, which is very sad to me. My Logitech Z2300 speaker set,
oh yeah,
that was a little old when I bought it in 2009, I think is when I bought mine. And those are fantastic. Like not a lot of top
They
end,
weren't
but it was
cheap,
all about
though.
the base with those. It wasn't. Yeah, I mean, it was only around $100 by the time I bought it. But yeah, like the $100 to
Oh, okay.
$200 price range. Like we had those the THX certified that 2.1 system forever. That was like $150, and then the C2300, and then you went up a little bit to go to the 5-channel surrounds. And Logitech, I think it was living in that $250 to $300 price range for a lot of the nicer stuff, but we just don't have as many options anymore, which is unfortunate. But I will quickly cover the last review because I wrote it, and this went up on the site today. It's for a Asus ROG Strix Flare mechanical gaming keyboard. This is an interesting looking product. This is a RGB keyboard, of course. It's using Cherry MX RGB switches. It gives you a lot of flexibility with the switch type. So whatever your preference is, this is offered in red, brown, blue, black, speed silver, or silent red options. It works with their software as far as customization of the lighting, key customization. It has macro supports. This is a wired keyboard. One of the things that was nice about it is it does have a USB pass-through, so you can plug another device in, like your mouse or a phone or something, while using the keyboard. And as far as features go, it's right up there with any of the higher end keyboards. The construction is good. It is plastic on the top and bottom. I've seen quite a few keyboards lately that have like a metal top plate. This one's still plastic. It felt rigid though, not creaky or anything. The one complaint I had about this, and we had the MX Red version, and I like red. It's that linear feel. It doesn't have like a click, just kind of like as you bottom out keys, and I'm a heavy-handed typist. It does have that nice mechanical kind of feel and sound to it, but not clicky like a blue would be, and missing that slight tactile feel of a brown. But that's really a discussion for another day about like key switch preference. But the implementation of key switches is one thing. The problem I had with the overall feel, the only real detractor I had for this thing was the key caps, which is kind of important because that's what you're actually, interacting with. Keycaps here are a little thin, and the overall feel was a little bit less premium. Like they felt like the keycaps that would be on a less expensive keyboard, and the lighting was kind of diffuse coming off the keys, which was kind of nice actually, because one of the things about this that's very different is kind of like those speakers we were talking about. This has like ambient lighting built in. Have you guys ever seen a keyboard that had like side down firing lights that matched the RGB effects of the key lights?
No.
I mean, it's subtle, but it did create a little bit of a glow around the keyboard, and it matched whatever color, like the zone of keys directly adjacent to it was. So I don't know if it's borrowing lighting from the keys themselves or how that works, but you can see a picture in the review. It's actually kind of a bright light coming off the edge of the keyboard there, but interesting things like that. Oh, and the other really novel thing about this design, the logo, they call it the badge on this, is a piece of acrylic, and it slides in the top and slides out to allow you to use a blank that it includes, which you can put your own logo on. I mean, if you wanted to go have it etched, I guess, you could have it like whatever you wanted it to say, whatever picture you wanted on it. I mean, I could get Josh's face engraved into mine and put that in this
Oh, could
keyboard.
you? Hmm.
I think so. I could try myself. I'll just use like the edge of a knife, use like a pocket knife, and just scratch, a heart, and then like write the word Josh in the middle of the heart. But anyway, the issues with the keyboard, like I said, a little bit light on the keycaps themselves, which you wouldn't expect because the pricing, the list pricing anyway, is $179. So all the other features, the novel lighting, the customizable badge, all that stuff, the overall feature set is very good. It's kind of where you expect from one of these premium keyboards, but like dedicated media keys, all that kind of stuff. But the actual street pricing on the one that I reviewed is like $139 when I looked yesterday. So it is selling for considerably less. I think 139 is where I would want this to be, but I'd like to see maybe some sturdier keycaps, not necessarily like double shot keycaps, but something a little bit thicker, a little bit more premium feeling. But you can check out the review and decide for yourself. That's the beauty of this. We have, like, let's see, there's a number of news stories to get to as we enter the second half of hour number 2 here. So let's get through them. Who wrote up news on the MX, the new laptop GPUs? I guess that was Scott. Has anybody looked?
Sir, not appearing on this podcast.
Yeah. This is kind of odd because it's not necessarily a new GPU from NVIDIA. This is not an RX mobile GPU or a new GTX mobile GPU. It's what would appear to be the successor to the MX150 that we see on a lot of sort of laptops that offer like a light gaming experience, not like a real powerful GPU or using the latest architecture. But something new that we're going to see out there in the laptop space. It's the MX230 and 250. They're still on GDDR5 memory or can be paired with DDR3, depending on what the OEM wants to do. And it is, Scott was speculating here, minor performance regression is possible versus the MX150.
The strange thing about this, and there's some speculation that it could be, that this is, merely a die shrink or a different process, but same basic performance target. But the issue is NVIDIA, like most companies teasing products like this, show relative performance, and they're testing it or advertising it against the UHD 620, the Intel integrated part, and they're saying that the MX250 is up to 3.5 times faster, and the 230 is up to 2.6 times faster. But the MX150, which is the older part, is listed as up to 4 times faster than the 620. So a little question there about, maybe there's been some we know Intel has done some driver improvements, so that could account for it, that the 620 has improved since that initial test has been conducted, or there's just, this is a different part on a different node that could be a slight performance regression, but is just basically a better, more efficient process for that lower end chipset or lower end performance level.
Yeah, like everything else, we'll just have to wait and see, I guess, when we actually have hardware in hand. But not the most exciting news, but this could be, if you like GPUs and you like saving money, that there's something about that $279 price point. I wonder who just released a product for $279, and AMD was very happy to send out PR about a price drop for the Vega 56.
Were they happy though? Do you think? The timing and tone of that press release was more like, "Oh shit, we have to do something." I don't know if happy would be the word I would describe, but
it was framed in a very positive way. There were a lot of positive words. I'm not going to rip on them, and obviously they have to do something. And if they don't have Navi ready yet, then what better than to just compete on price, which is something that AMD has, historically done. Like, give you a great bang for your buck, even if they can't say we are the performance leader. But has anyone actually seen an RX Vega 56 for this price? I have not.
I've seen them listed, but they're not in stock.
I checked before we started, and it was in stock with 2 left. It is once again out of stock.
Where is this? Where it was in stock with 2 left? Was it Amazon or was it?
No, Newegg.
Newegg. Oh, I see. Yep. Let's see. Oh, now it's back to auto notify.
But,
that's right.
Yeah, it's back there.
So they'll be selling these as soon as they can get them in stock. I can imagine they'll just sell out every 10 minutes.
Yeah, and the phrasing suggested this isn't permanent.
Yeah, which is
it
unfortunate.
Might be, but
I mean, how permanent is anything? How permanent is the Vega 56? Like that, it's a couple years old now, and you would think that it'll be supplanted at some point this year, mid-year, end year, whenever we see the Navi stuff. if indeed we'll get like a higher end Navi first. I mean, I don't know if that'll be, you know, if we'll get like the lower end first or not. But anyhow, I mean, for 279, if you can find it in stock, you're getting 8 gigabytes. So they have that advantage over the 1660 Ti. Very good performance. I mean, that's one card that I have not dragged back out, because for those who don't know, when the site kind of changed hands, when I took over as editor in chief, I decided I wanted to be personally accountable for any benchmark numbers that I was displaying. You know, so that means not reusing any of the old benchmarks. So my first couple of weeks were literally benchmarking and benchmarking to try to build up a stable of comparisons to actually launch that first GPU review I did, which is actually the RTX 2060. And the 56 is one that I haven't retested. I did the RX 590 and I did the Vega 64, now the Vega 7, or the Radeon 7, but have not gone back and visited the Vega 56 yet. So I'm going to need to do that at some point to sort of fill things out. But
yeah, if it had been widely available at 279, that would be a smashing product, because I haven't even had an HBM based video card here in my house yet. And I was going to get one. And then I kind of dug a little deeper. It's like, not going to happen.
I think we still have the Fury X. We could probably send you.
Don't. No.
No?
You've always wanted to be a furry, Josh. Come on.
No,
Try
I
it.
don't.
I have the Nano here. It's out of reach, or I'd grab it, but I've always loved that card just because it's so comically small.
Yeah, it's a tough little card.
Yeah. Seriously, I dropped it on the floor, much to my chagrin, and it's fine, other than a scuff. But yeah, if you can find them, Vega 56, 279. And now let's get into the endless speculation about upcoming GPUs, because, you know, it just wouldn't be a GPU launch without immediately talking about what's next. And it seems like, well, literally, we've had a graphics card per month, more than a graphics card per month since the beginning of the year. 3 major releases in the last month and a half. So why wouldn't NVIDIA come out with even more graphics cards just to torture me? And Jeremy, you wrote about the endless online speculation, which has already begun, it seems, for some new NVIDIA GTX card.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're already bored of the 1660 Ti, aren't we? So we need something new. And the nice thing about these new cards, if they exist, and our friend AppySack is usually not terribly wrong about this sort of thing, we're going to see in the coming months a GTX 1660, plain old non-TI version, and a 1650. It also will be the return of sort of that mid-range where you can't really afford an awesome GPU, but you've got enough cash left over, you don't have to depend on one that's on die. So if these are right, the 1650 is going to be under $200 at 180, whereas the 1660 is going to sit at 230. Both, you know, well within the range of just about any budget out there for someone just starting to get into this, or is looking to set someone up with something and doesn't want to spend too much on it. Now, we don't know a lot about these cards, unfortunately, it all being leaks and rumors and such. But according to the leaks, we're expecting the 1650 to have 4 gigabytes of RAM and a core clock sitting at about 1.485 gigahertz. Not going to blow anything out of the water, but it will be kind of nice. And, you know, one day we might get like a 1650 GT or GS, or maybe a 1600, and we can just all be utterly confused about what brand we're talking about, because there are so many different model numbers kicking around. In theory, you're going to see one. The original thought was that you'd see it by the end of February. Obviously, unless something really magical happens tomorrow, which no one's talking about, it's mid-Marchish. You're going to see that with the lower cost one, mid-year, end of April, beginning of May, assuming, of course, that they exist. It's the $200 mark used to be a magic number. It isn't anymore. Hasn't been for a few generations. But it's kind of nice to see a couple of cards hit that area where you're a young kid, you're just trying to build your first computer, or you're building one for a parent or a sibling that you don't like enough to be able to say, yeah, well, you can have my old 1080. Yeah, it's a good price point. Anyone else interested in these, or is it just going to be, oh yeah, you might as well stick it in an OEM build and forget about it?
Well, I think depending on how things shape up, I mean, this is the continued assault that NVIDIA is able to levy against AMD because they've got the high end, they've got arguably good, depending on your application, they've got a good chunk of the mid range. They're going to now saturate the more entry level stuff too because their performance lead allows them to segment down to every 30 to $50 increments. So I mean, I do want to. It's good to see competition. I hope we'll see more of this. But these could be good options at those prices. I agree that the naming. I think we'll get used to it. The naming still is a little confusing to me. And splitting the RTX and GTX line instead of just using that GTX or RTX name as the differentiator, having the different numbers as well. It's a little strange. But I mean, this is going to continue to put pressure on Team Red.
And speaking of naming, I'll mention it was a comment on Twitter, Jay's 2 cents, when somebody was talking about the name, like 1660, like seriously, and Jay said, somebody made the joke, what, because it was, closer to 2000 than 1000, like if they gone with like 1500, and Jay was like, actually, that's exactly what they said to me when I asked. So I had never asked that specific question. I asked if my question to them was, is it 1660 Ti because you don't want to confuse people in the market with RTX versus GTX branding? That was kind of a yes to that. So, but 1660 versus something else. Well, 16 is closer to 20 than 10 is. So there's your answer for whatever that's worth. Personally, I just want to see them put the RTX or GTX at the end of the name like they used to many years ago with like the GTX and the GT and the GTS, and people who knew graphics cards knew what the difference was, and the price kind of told the story, like, oh, the GTS is the less expensive one, the GTX is the more expensive one, the Ultra is the really, really expensive one that has the highest performance. So anyway, were there any more rumors or speculation to get to? What else was here? Oh, well, Jeremy, you posted it was like a similar story, but I think this is the DigiTimes report, right? And our buddy, or we're talking about all the same stuff, so I guess we've already covered this.
Yeah, we kind of blended those two stories together.
We blended the two stories. Yeah. Okay, so when you're looking at the rundown, you will see we've already talked about that. So, not to be outdone by Logitech, who brought back the MX 518 to the delight of gamers everywhere. But Microsoft, who used to be pretty much synonymous with mice back in the day when you bought a Microsoft mouse and it came with a
mouse,
you know it.
Yeah. I'm talking like way back when you bought a Microsoft mouse, and like the mouse driver for Windows was the Microsoft mouse driver on that 3.5-inch floppy. But yes, the IntelliMouse, like these, they've been around for a long, long time.
Well, they are almost impossible to kill.
Is it kind of the same thing as the MX 518? Is this like a souped up version with a new sensor, or what's going on here?
Well, it is, and shiny butt. There's glows emanates from the butt of the mouse because they can't just have updated it. Yeah, so it's the the Pixart PMW 3389 that you see on a vast majority of mice all over the place. There is one very large problem with this. It's only being released to the Asian market at this point.
Oh.
Well,
Yeah.
the MX518 was launched in China 3 months before it launched here too. So
Before
that's not
it launched
necessarily
here.
a death knell for it in this country, but
But yeah, like used one of these in the office and at home for a very, very long time. It's a very well designed. It's a shape that if you've used it before, you're gonna recognize it in a millisecond. And as you'd pointed out, using Sebastian, using the old MX518, that sensor really doesn't stack up to the resolutions we run at nowadays. So seeing this jump up will be really nice.
yeah,
And you can finally.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
I was going to say, we've seen that sensor. I think I had that exact same sensor in a HyperX mouse that I tested, and it's in a lot of stuff, and it goes up pretty high. I cannot remember the actual resolution of the sensor offhand, but very fast if you want it to be. I would imagine this would be customizable because at its native speed, that's a very, very fast sensor.
Yeah, 1600 CPI apparently.
Okay.
Because
Or
we can't just have DPI.
16,000 or 16?
Or sorry, 16,000. Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, 1600 would be very disappointing.
Yeah.
I feel very overwhelmed because within 2 weeks now, my gaming mouse during my formative years when I was building my first gaming PCs and gaming with friends was Logitech's mice, culminating with the MX518. So that's back. In fact, I just got it in, so we'll be looking at that shortly. And my productivity mouse, when I was doing other non-gaming for my schoolwork and all that, was an Intel mouse. This style, this shape. So it's like, whoa,
Flashbacks.
If you could turn back time, if you could find some way.
What's the next
to come
lyric?
back?
Something
So
about
take back all the mice that have
person-
hurt you.
Yeah, and you'll stay. If I could read your DPI. Anyway.
I'd give it all to you.
Yeah.
I'm going to give to Josh is the reins for the following story, which is all about TSMC, mass production of enhanced 7 nanometer using EUV in March. Josh, so many questions. First of all, what does TSMC stand for? What is EUV? What is March? Go.
March is a date in month and year. Okay, anyway. TSMC, Taiwanese Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, EUV Extreme Ultraviolet. So EUV has been the promise that we have been given for years and years. We have talked about EUV back in the early 2000s. This was the way to go forward because we've been using light to do photoresist on semiconductors, and unfortunately light is both a particle and a wave, and so when you get to a certain point, light would not be able to make kind of a straight line in something that you're doing. Things would get wonky, and we're at that point. And so they have different kinds of tricks that they do to, in terms of waveguides, multi-patterning, to get to just get the geometries down in photoresist so you have, relatively straight lines, but you don't have, people have tried like electron scanning and stuff, but because, as you go lower and lower in geometry, measurements, light does crazy things. Like I said, it's a wave and a particle, and things get whacked. And I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but it's important because it is something that has held us back for quite a while, and it has caused great expenses. It used to be that you had an air gap with in between the photoresist material and the light source, and then we went to immersion technology, and they've done multi-patterning to be able to make these structures as accurate as possible at these really tiny geometries. Well, EUV allows them to do some interesting things. Mainly, EUV by itself is not going to increase performance. It is not going to make transistor speed faster. What it's going to do is it is going to cut down on the amount of what you call it, steps that you have to do when, if you had double patterning and quad patterning stuff, you had a lot of different litho steps that are now compressed into one. And not only that, but the resulting structures are going to be more accurate to where you want them to be as compared to the older versions, which is a blue laser, I think, that runs at a couple of 100 watts, and it worked fine, but they had to do a lot of different tricks to get things to work out like they would, because it's just the properties of light. And so with EUV, you're not going to gain performance, but you could potentially gain better yields, better bends, and fewer steps in producing a wafer, because you don't have to have as many photoresist steps because of multi-masking and multi-patterning type stuff that they're doing. So TSMC is introducing a partial kind of EUV step that I think it's in the 2 lower layers that they will utilize EUV. And again, it cuts down on the amount of times you have to process the wafers through litho, and you have better results because you don't have multi-patterning type stuff. And they're going to start this out with 7 nanometer. And, temper your enthusiasm. It's not going to catch the world on fire, but it is a very integral step in getting better products out at lower nanometer and greater densities. And this is the first step, because each one of these stinking EUV units, I think they're in the megawatt range of power consumption. It's insane. And it's going to cost them a little bit more initially, just because the power required to run these things is nuts. And even though you're cutting out a couple of steps as compared to traditional litho, you're still expending a lot of energy. And it's going to be interesting to see how TSMC actually does this and how well they're able to produce it. And this is also why they're only doing a couple of basic layers versus doing the entire stack and in photo with EUV. So it's the physics behind it is really amazing, and it's interesting. And I'm probably had too many beers to really go into it, but it's a good step, and it's one thing that we're kind of looking forward to, because until a year ago there was literally 2-3 dozen EUV machines out there. Now they've produced quite a few more. People are integrating those into their workflows, and we're going to start seeing some of the first products out early in late fall of this year.
AKA
Hello?
autumn. Yes.
Hopefully November 7th.
Yes.
Well, it is an
AMD
N7
and
process.
number 7 or something about that. Oh, so actually, speaking of AMD, Jeremy, don't go away. You have to tell us about the latest version of the Adrenaline software.
I suppose that we could share that secret with our viewers if they really want. Now, we've already spent last week, I think it was, going on at great length about drivers, and we're back to it again. But there is something interesting about the 19.2.3. This will be the first Adrenaline that actually bundles in the iGPU in your Ryzen processor. So you don't have to go shopping around for a separate driver update from AMD. It is now going to be bundled in when you update, which is really nice and offers AMD a way for those few brave people that have gone for hybrid crossfire and combining an APU and a GPU together. Performance-wise, you are seeing a bounce up, especially, again, when you're pairing it with a Ryzen mobile processor. So if you're into esports and you're just carting around something that's using one of those Vega compute cores on top of the AMD chip, you are actually going to see a noticeable boost, along with it just being a lot more interesting. There is, however, a little caveat that we looked into, which is if you bought the i7-8705G, you're still going to have to go to Intel for that graphics driver. Sorry about that. That would have been interesting to see it incorporated as well, but apparently Kaby Lake G just didn't, sell enough maybe to convince them to do this. But overall, I mean, if you are running a system that's got a Ryzen APU in it, download it. Like, you've got absolutely no reason not to.
Well, I think with Kaby Lake G, I don't know if it was much about the sales, but that product was always an odd marriage from the start. It always seemed Intel was protective of it. They were very careful with the way that they marketed and how they referred to the AMD components. So
it was no Reese's peanut butter cup.
Right. Yeah. Not surprising to see that it's not gonna have compatibility with this new revision.
But for anyone else, I mean, a nice little upgrade. I saw some of the features and enhancements there, and not open, but what is it? Why am I forgetting the DirectX version of ray tracing support? ML. I'm completely.
The DirectX version of ray tracing? You mean like just DXR?
Yeah, DXR, not.
Yeah, there's something else I cannot remember right now. Maybe. Anyhow, let's move on. It's getting late. SanDisk. They announced a 1 terabyte UHSI micro SDXC card using this new Western Digital flash, and we could get into the standards that it conforms to, which are, looking at the article by Tim here, C10, V30, U3, A2 speed classes. But what that translates into is up to 160 megabytes per second reads and 90 megabytes per second writes. And not just really fast sequentials. We're talking IOPS of up to 4,000 reads and 2,000 writes. And they're saying you could support like an actual OS, like Android applications running off of the micro SD rather than internal storage, which is somewhat notoriously slow on smartphones. Anyhow, go from like eMMC to this, and it's compelling not just because it's going to be fast, but it's a 1 terabyte micro SD card that's fast. So I wonder what this means for the future of, like digital imaging equipment, like cameras and, camcorders and that sort of thing, making use of something this small that's this fast. Like, this is a legitimate replacement for a professional level SD card in a DSLR.
Which may or may not freak out when it's offered an SD card this large.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it's pricey though. That's the big thing. So this technology is $200 for the 512 gig, $500 for the 1 terabyte. So that is going to be an initial limiting factor in application. Also, image not to scale.
No? Okay. I guess it is a little bit smaller than that. Anytime we've seen really fast flash in the history, the relatively short history of things using flash memory for storage, It's always been just exorbitantly expensive at launch, and then it drops fairly quickly, hopefully, when things scale up and they're producing this in big quantities. But nice to see something that fast and with that kind of capacity. Like, I have a digital audio player that I would love to put this thing into that takes a micro SD card. 1 terabyte that fast. Think of the transfer speeds, all the uncompressed FLAC files of 1960s jazz music I could put on that card. You just wouldn't believe. All right. Our final story is something that I wrote up this morning in my confusion and growing rage about the state of USB from the lovely people at the USB Implementers Forum, who I saw this last night before I went to bed. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. USB 3.
Are you sure the I stands for implementers?
I don't know. What else might it stand for, Jeremy?
Well, after today, I'm thinking idiots fits.
I read what I could into this and I wrote about it, but I would love to hear everybody else's perspective on this. Jeremy, what do you think? What the hell is going on with this? First of all, what do these names mean? And how is this not making it so much worse than it already was?
I never thought I would say this, but I'm starting to miss FireWire. It's so, like, at this point you can't just say USB X. It's USB X point X Gen X. And apparently this was not frustrating enough for people. So now we're going to have 3 USB 3.2 specifications. So they just roll off the tongue. USB 3.2 Gen 1. We're sort of used to that. So 5 gigabits, and also going to be known as super speed USB. You know, annoying, but okay. Then there's USB 3.2 Gen 2, which will be arriving when Gen 1 arrives, but will offer essentially double the bandwidth, and so therefore is super speed USB 10 gigabits. But now they just had to outdo themselves. You are now going to have to type out, when you're asking somebody something, about the USB 3.2 Gen 2 by 2. And how it's generation 2 times 2, generation 2x2. It's nice. I mean, 20 gigabits on a USB connection is beautiful, but do you really want to be super speed USB something? And now you're trusting the various manufacturers to actually live up to it. And as we all know with the USB 3.1 cables, you can depend on every single one not to kill your machine or burst into flames. Absolutely. So this is not going to make this any worse whatsoever. Even to just, like at this point, you're already throwing your hands up in the air and screaming. Then they move on to say that, well, we don't actually want to make the physical connection a standard. That's going to be up to the people that sell the cables. So now you're going to have mixed connectors in amongst the 3 mixed new generations of USB that you already can't bloody well tell the difference between without digging into it and looking them up. And then, because they had to, they're suggesting that maybe we should revisit the old USB names and maybe come up with some new nomenclature for previous generations of USBs, so now you don't even know what the hell it is that you plugged in on something you've owned for 10 years. It's amazing. Utterly and completely amazing. And it's just going to drive you absolutely nuts by the time that you get into it. And I forgot to mention, just because it's USB 3.2 doesn't guarantee you can charge through it, because there will be different voltage specifications or battery charging specifications, again, based on whoever it is that made the product you just bought. So this is universal and a standard in the same way that a dumpster fire is an efficient way of waste disposal. I don't know. Does anyone see anything good out of this?
No. No. Why didn't we go to USB 4 and USB 5? Then you could
Yes.
say, hey, that's a USB 5C port. And you know exactly what it is. It's the fastest one with the you can turn it either way around. Instead, it's now 3.2 Gen 1, Gen 2 by 2, then connectors.
Type C.
Type
B.
I don't know why
or
I don't know why they're hanging on to USB 3 so hard. Like USB 2 was a big deal. It was high-speed USB for the first time. And then USB 3.0 came out, basically interface that was faster or had the potential to be faster than FireWire. And it's just been how many years now with USB 3, and we had 3.1, and then we had to remember which generation. I can't ever get
2008, I think. 2008, 2009 was release of USB 3.0.
And then it's like, oh, it's 3.1. Well, which generation of 3.1? What's the actual speed of it? And looking over some
what kind of
their
physical
like,
connector does it have? And
yeah, like the key messages that they have, like they're talking about messaging and packaging recommendations. Like, what's the key message? Like one of them is allows system OEMs and peripheral developers adequate room for product versatility and market differentiation without the burden of carrying obsolete interfaces or losing compatibility. What does that mean?
Well,
It's using the same interface.
Right. That's the trick of this. This is being driven by manufacturers who want to have, who may have legacy ports, traditional USB 3. They want to have compatibility with this ecosystem. They want to be able to market to consumers that they have the latest standards. But it is so versatile. There are so many different things you can do with the different port types, the different power delivery capabilities, the different speeds, and they've missed. I mean, you contrast this with what Wi-Fi has done, and Bluetooth too, to a certain extent, with going to more simplified generations. But manufacturers don't want that, because then they'll say, if there is a USB 3 or USB 4, USB 5, they've already got a product in the market that's USB 3. And even though it's maybe compatible, they can't market it as such, or they can't market it as being the new thing. So they push for this kind of like inclusive, crazy nomenclature. But in the end, it's gonna bite them, because when consumers have issues with this stuff, which they're going to have, and they're either blowing up their devices because they have the wrong power, or they're not getting audio through their USB port like they thought they would, or whatever, it's the manufacturers who are going to face the burden of the support for trying to sort that out. So it is unfortunate that they can't. I mean, even if they had said USB 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, or USB 3 Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, there were opportunities here to develop or to move to a path that made more sense, and they've abandoned it at each pass, and now God knows how we're going to explain this to normal people.
But isn't it like to the point now where wireless technology is easier to understand than a wired connection?
Almost.
Oh yeah, it's getting there.
Because I mean, you don't have to worry about charging.
But AG is still faster than N, right? Yeah, it's
looking
almost as much of a mess.
I put the whole release at the bottom of this post this morning. I'm just like looking over it. Like they basically are writing a white paper on why something has to change, yet this is their solution. They're saying that it's critical for the manufacturers to distinguish between the Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3 products. It says they need to identify the performance capabilities of a product separately from the other protocols or physical characteristics in a product name and marketing materials. And please note the following: USB 3.2 only defines the transfer rate of a product. USB 3.2 is not a USB Type-C, USB standard A, micro USB, or other USB cable or connector. It is not a power delivery or USB battery charging standard. Okay, why
not available in all states?
They're really, really concerned about compliance with this, and it is the manufacturers who make up this body or whatever this is, this IF, and it's ludicrous. Like they're hanging on to USB 3. They have a wide mix of connectors out there. It starts to make something like Apple's Lightning connector almost makes sense, even though most people would have liked to see that go to USB Type-C. they can just put lightning on things, and it's lightning. Like, it has a name, it's a brand, it has a particular look to it, it's a certain size, it has certain capabilities, and that makes sense. Just like Firewire made sense. Like Firewire 400, right in the name, up to 400 megabits per second, right? And then Firewire 800 came out, completely different connector. It was a bigger connector, faster speed, 800 in the name. And this just, we've had the same connector, well, the primary connector, the legacy connector now, I guess, for many, many years, different speed ratings. At one point, it was going to be like the color was going to tell you, like, you could look in like the blue super speed, like the SS logo. Well, not that SS logo, but a super speed logo on the side of your device, like your laptop, would mean, oh, that's a USB 3 port. But then we started getting like, it said super speed, but it's a different generation, so it's a different actual throughput, and they couldn't use blue anymore because that was 3.0. So then they went back to black, which was like high speed USB. Like, none of this makes any sense. You have to consult spec sheets to even figure out what's in the device that you have, what its capabilities are. Like, am I limited by what I'm plugging in, or is it the interface? And they should have
Does this
just
one work
gone
with Thunderbolt?
Yeah, and that's another can of worms. But why did USB 3 have to have the same connector as Thunderbolt? And I mean, it's nice.
Well, because originally that was a damn good idea. Then they kind of went the opposite way.
USB Type-C should have just been USB 4.0. I don't know why it wasn't. I don't think that the average consumer knows what Type-C means. Somebody who goes into Best Buy looking for a flash drive or an external hard drive for their laptop, they're having to have that kind of stuff explained to them by the salesperson. Like, oh, well, that MacBook only has one port on the side, and you need something called USB Type-C drive to connect to it. But first, you're going to need a dongle to actually make. We won't get into that, but it's a mess. Josh is unhappy. I'm unhappy. But you know what? I think we've reached the end. So if anybody has any picks. Oh, I like this.
Speak now.
Somebody pick for me. But yes, Jim, start us off, please.
All right. So my pick is it's a humble bundle of Star Trek comic books from IDW. I guess who's the primary publisher of those books now. Now, I was never into comics as a kid. It just wasn't something I didn't have any friends who were into it. I just never got into it. But then I remember right before the launch of the J.J. Abrams Star Trek universe, so 2009, there was a prequel graphic novel / comic that came out called Countdown. It was a series of them, 4 of them, I think, before the movie. And I read those, and I really liked them. And that was kind of my first real jump into comics. And so I've read a few, here and there since then. And I noticed this launched today. It's a bundle of comics. They're distributed in PDF or in I forget the file format. It's CCD or CCR. There's a file format for a comic book reader.
CCR.
CCR. So you get your choice.
It makes me think of music.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of them here, and they're all different, like Prime Universe, Next Generation stuff, original series stuff, J.J. Abrams series stuff, Star Trek Discovery. There's just a whole bunch here. $15 gets you all of them, and I just got it today, so I haven't had a chance to really read them all. But there's looks like a good mix for $15. That's a lot of Star Trek comics.
Star Trek and Green Lantern.
Oh no! It's the Star Trek versus Transformers.
What?
You got to
Star Trek Transformers.
That is amazing. I read that a long time ago.
Yeah, some classic crossover series here. Good stuff.
It looks City on the Edge of Forever in comic book form. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I may have to buy this. $15 for
Harlan
everything is, curl up with an iPad and just thumb through comic books for hours and hours and hours. I believe Jeremy.
No plastic protector required. So the least worst deal that I have seen on a Canadian RX 270, so or RTX 2070. So if you're looking to trace some rays at 1080p, this is a great card to do it. It's about the only card you're going to do it on, because the 1060 or the 2060 will probably disappoint you, and the 2080 is overpowered. But honestly, at $640 after the mail-in rebate, which is not the most amazing thing, but still, that's well under 100. It's more than $100 less than I've seen most specials on. And Mike's Computers is pretty close, and they ship relatively cheaply. And even better, if you can find it for cheaper, they will beat it. And they do actually do that, having bought from them before. So if you're up here in Canada and you are looking for a 2070, grab it, because there ain't that many left.
That I just did the calculation, and $659.99 Canadian equals currently $501 US dollars, 501.76 So that's right at the MSRP here, $499 for the 2070. So
yeah,
you only just now are getting cards at MSRP. That's sad.
Free healthcare doesn't come cheap.
Oh, okay. Well, you have to throw that out there, don't you? Just rub it in. Josh, do you have
I can. I got ointment for free just a little while ago.
I don't want to hear about it. No more ointment and rashes.
What?
As for me, I've only been talking about this for a while. I've only been playing the original for now damn near 4 years, but Dirt Rally 2.0 is out. It's not perfect, but it's still really good. Improved graphics, improved audio, improved physics. The only thing that kind of screwed up on in release is their force feedback. This was something that was initially fixed and extended upon in the original Dirt Rally 1 about 2 months after its early access release. And as you know, if you're a rally sim fan, Dirt Rally really kind of it threw a wrench in the gears of everything in terms of racing sims. It had a level of realism that hadn't been seen. It was, called the Dark Souls of rally sims, because it was just really hard to master. It was pretty accurate. It gave you an idea of what a lot of these racers actually went through. I mean, not in actuality, because going, through forests at 140 miles an hour is a totally different experience than sitting in your office chair and playing a game. But this improves upon everything. You have more areas to go to. You have more rallycross tracks. You've got really good graphics, good sound. It's a brand new title, so it's pricey. But, there's a lot of really good stuff in there and a lot of content, and it's beautiful and it's fun to play. And once they figure out the force feedback stuff, it's going to be fantastic. So expect probably a fix for that in a month. But until then, you can still play it. And, you just got to kind of read up on how to set up your wheel. If you're playing with a keyboard or a Xbox type controller, your experience is going to be fine regardless, because it's just not a wheel. It's not a force feedback wheel. You get a lot more information from those, and it's a lot more fun. But if you're just going to use a controller, then just get it now, and it's going to be great for you. But control, handling, everything, it's spot on, looks great. It's a lot of fun. They've extended out just how you actually play the game as compared to Dirt Rally 1. There's an actual start to kind of finish in the main campaign, I guess you'd call it. But yeah, it's hours and hours of fun. Looks great. It's a lot of fun. Get it. We'll eventually get a league going for it.
Real quick, because I think, Sebastian, you don't have a pick, right?
I don't have a pick.
Okay, so just in place of your pick, to answer some questions that have been in the chat for a few weeks, regarding common question is what happened to the Twitch stream. We used to stream live to YouTube and Twitch. The issue with the Twitch stream is we're not in that studio anymore. That studio had fiber internet with real good upload bandwidth. I'm now hosting this and doing the production myself here out of my house, where the only internet connection available to me is cable with a max bandwidth upload of 20 megabits, which is never actually that high. It usually is like 10 to 12 or so. And so to host remotely to all these guys and to then stream to YouTube, the testing I've done has shown that I don't think I could accommodate streaming to both. Now, there are some services where you stream to like a third party, and then that third party streams out to the various platforms. We could look at that. And I'm also seeing in the chat here some folks saying that Twitch will accept an HEVC input stream. So if I can look at, I didn't know that. If I'll look at that some more, if that's true, we could upload a significantly lower bitrate file to Twitch or stream, and then that might be an option too. So that's why we haven't done that. And then also in regards to Alex, who was the guy who ran the production, he was never full time at PC Per. He was a very successful IT guy. He had his own career going. He kind of did that for us as a favor, basically part time. And he decided with all the changes at the end of the year that he was going to leave because he got very busy at his day job. So that's why he's not here. Also, with us not having a central studio anymore, it would be a little awkward to have him, he'd come over to my house and sit in my basement with me and run the stream. I mean, I love the guy. I would love to have him over, but that would be a little weird. So that's what happened there. So there are a lot of changes happening. I know some people still don't, they're joining us in between weeks. They don't hear all the developments, but we are still working on perfecting this new setup. So I will take a look at getting to Twitch again in one way or another, but it may not be possible for our current setup.
We could always stream old games on Twitch.
Yeah, we could still stream content to Twitch, like as specials, but simulcast streaming to both, I just don't know.
I don't have a low-cut enough V-neck for that, though.
That's all right. We'll get you a green screen, have a floating head for you, cut you out.
Super. Anyway. Wrap it up.
All right, Josh is cranky.
Yeah, he's
falling down.
Not cranky. I'm just
getting
tired.
kind of lippy lately. Josh, would you like to sign us off?
This has been the PC Perspective Podcast. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you guys watching us. And for this is what episode number
534.
534. That is a lot of episodes. Thanks for watching.
34.
Oh, somebody found the effects presets on his mixer.
Yep, there's the button. There's the button.
And with that, good night.
And have a better tomorrow.
See, Jeremy knows. Here he is, right down there. There's Jeremy.
There it is.
Nope, up this way.
Here's the story of 4 PC purrs who were living in a very funky world. Some had hair of gold, and then one other. The youngest one with a full beard.
The youngest has a full beard? I don't know.
I think Jim is the youngest of the group, isn't he?
Oh, he probably is. Jim, you're just a youngster, aren't you?
Relatively, I guess.
You don't have to disclose your age if you're not comfortable with that, but I've never asked. How old is Jim?
I'm 35.
Oh yeah. Okay. I think we're all older than you.
Yeah, because I'm 46. Sebastian's
37.
36, right?
I'm 37.
37.
Yeah, Sebastian.
You don't look it.
Exactly. He's deceptively.
He's
It's
got
a
a portrait in his basement that he's been hiding behind a lot of PC cases that has been aging for him.
Yeah.
And then there's Jeremy, who's 53.
112. At least
All
it
right.
feels like it today.
All right.
I think
Well,
we did it. We did a
yep.
podcast.
We did it. Thanks everyone in the chat. And yes, Leslie Lai, I am younger than Sebastian, despite it's the vegan diet. It's his vegan or vegetarian diet. I eat nothing but processed raw meat or red meat. So
I eat nothing but vegetarians.
there you go. There you go. Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and we will see you next time. I'm going to take the stream down, and I hope everyone has a great week.